I called my parents to tell them I was diagnosed with cancer. They said, "We're busy at your cousin's wedding." I went through chemo alone. Months later they asked, "Can you help pay for her honeymoon?" My 7-year-old daughter gave them a letter from my doctor. They read it and their hands trembled. Mom sat down without a word. When I told my parents I had cancer, they said they were too busy. "We're at your cousin's wedding. Can we talk later?" That's what they said while I stood in the hospital parking lot, holding the diagnosis in my hand and fighting the urge to scream. I went through chemo alone. My daughter, Isla, just 7 years old, held my hand through every appointment. Then months later my parents messaged me asking if I could help pay for Marielle's honeymoon, the cousin whose wedding they chose over my life. I didn't answer. But Isla did something I never expected. She gave them a letter from my doctor. They read it, and their hands began to shake. My mom sat down without saying a word. That was the moment everything changed. Before everything fell apart, my life was quiet, predictable even. I worked as a nurse at a small community clinic in Portland. Most days started the same. I'd wake up around 6, make breakfast for my daughter Isla, then bike to work in the early morning light. My shift ran from 8 to 4. I spent my days taking blood pressure, calming anxious patients, holding hands through hard news, and reassuring young moms who weren't sure what they were doing. I loved my job. It made me feel like I mattered. Isla is 7. She's curious about everything, always asking questions, always drawing in the margins of her homework. She loves frogs, hates socks, and once told me she wants to be a scientist who invents a color no one's ever seen before. She's also the only person I've ever met who can tell when I'm lying just by looking at me. I didn't have much of a support system outside of her. My parents, Joanne and Russell, lived 3 hours away in Spokane. We talked occasionally. They called on birthdays and sent gift cards on Christmas. Our conversations were surface level, polite, the kind you have with someone you don't want to upset. They weren't cruel, just distant. My mom always seemed more invested in what my cousin Marielle was doing, what she wore to her job interviews, who she was dating, how much she spent on her wedding dress. Marielle was the golden child. I was the quiet one, the one who made interesting choices, as my dad once put it. The week before I found out I was sick, I had this deep, unshakable fatigue, not the tired you fix with a nap, but something else, something wrong. My hands ached. I had strange bruises on my legs that wouldn't fade. I ignored it at first, told myself it was stress or burnout from work. Nurses are always tired, I told myself. We put everyone else first, but Isla noticed. One night, while I was folding laundry on the couch, she came up behind me and put her small hand on my back. "Feels slow lately," she said, like a tired robot. That scared me more than anything. She could see it. I made an appointment the next day. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not even my best friend Liana, who had just moved out of state. I figured I'd go in, get some blood work, rule out anything serious and move on. But the doctor didn't like my numbers. He ordered more tests than a biopsy. The day they told me it was lymphoma, I was alone in a sterile room with a clipboard in my lap, and a nurse who kept asking if there was someone I could call. I walked to the parking lot in a daze and sat in my car for a long time, just watching the condensation build on the windshield. I didn't cry, I didn't feel much of anything except cold. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. I told her the words exactly as the doctor said them. "It's lymphoma, stage 2. Her voice didn't change. I heard music and chatter in the background. "Oh Sarah, we're at Marielle's wedding, can we talk later?" I didn't know what to say. She didn't wait for an answer. The line went dead. That was the moment I understood I'd be doing this on my own. Over the next few days, I tried to find my footing. I had appointments to schedule, specialists to call, paperwork to sort through. Hila knew something was wrong, but I didn't tell her the full truth yet. I said I was sick and might be tired a lot. She nodded and went to her room. That night, I found a drawing on my pillow, me and her, both bald, holding hands in a field of stars. She didn't say a word about it. She didn't have to. I didn't tell my parents about the treatment plan. I didn't tell them when chemo started. I didn't tell them about the nausea, the hair loss, the nights I couldn't get out of bed except to crawl to the bathroom. They didn't ask. They sent a thank you note for the wedding gift I didn't send. That was it. I should have felt devastated by their silence, but I didn't. I felt hollow, like the air between us had always been thin, and now it had finally disappeared. But Isla stayed close. Every day she'd climb into my bed after school and ask, Good day or bad day? And no matter how I answered, she'd say the same thing. Okay? Then I'll be extra brave today. That's where everything began. In a tiny apartment, with a sick mom, a brave little girl, and a silence on the other end of the phone that told me I was on my own. Chemo started on a rainy Tuesday in October. I went straight from work at the clinic to the cancer center, changed into a hospital gown, and sat in the vinyl recliner waiting for the first drip. I had spent the morning giving flu shots and checking vitals for patients who didn't know I was about to become one myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. The nurse inserting my IV asked if anyone would be joining me. I told her no. She paused, nodded, and taped the line down gently. She didn't ask again. I respected that. It was easier not to explain. The first round wasn't the worst. It was the anticipation that broke me. Sitting still while poison dripped into my body, wondering how bad it would get. Thinking of Isla at school, hoping she had remembered her library books. I stared at the ceiling tiles and focused on my breath like I taught my patients to do during panic attacks. Inhale, hold, exhale, repeat. Afterward, I picked Isla up and pretended everything was fine. She climbed into the back seat and told me she got to be line leader. I smiled. My lips felt like paper. At home, I vomited so hard I burst a blood vessel in my eye. Isla waited outside the bathroom door holding a glass of water and her favorite stuffed frog, Henry. She didn't say anything. She just handed me the frog and helped me back to bed. I couldn't eat for 2 days. My parents didn't call, not once. I had texted them the day after the diagnosis, just a short message. It's lymphoma, starting treatment next week. I'll keep you updated. I never got a reply. Weeks passed. Nothing. Meanwhile, I tried to maintain a sliver of normal. I worked part-time when I could. I cleaned when my body allowed. I packed lunch for Isla and walked her to the bus stop unless I was too dizzy to stand. On those mornings she stood beside the couch and kissed my forehead before heading out the door. "Be brave, Mom," she'd whisper, as if she were the grown-up and I were the child. One afternoon, I opened my email during a brief stretch of energy. There was a message from my mom. Subject, a favor body. "Hi, sweetheart. Hope you're feeling okay. Marielle and Jordan are trying to plan a honeymoon to Santorini, but are a little short on funds. We were wondering if you could contribute maybe $2,000 to help them make it happen. No pressure. Just let us know. Love you." I read it twice. Then again, it didn't mention my health. It didn't ask how Isla was coping. It didn't ask how I was paying for my own treatment. Just $2,000 for a honeymoon. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall for a long time. Not angry, not sad, just stunned. That night I couldn't eat. My skin felt too tight, like I was wearing grief instead of clothes. Isla noticed right away. "Was it a bad day?" she asked. "Just a tired one," I said. She sat next to me silent for a while. Then she said, "Do Grandma and Grandpa know you're sick?" I told them. Did they forget? I didn't know what to say. Maybe they didn't want to remember. She got up and disappeared into her room. When she came back, she was holding one of my hospital papers. It was a follow-up letter from my oncologist describing the last round of chemo and my progress. She held it carefully like it might break. "Maybe they need this," she said. I didn't want her to carry that burden. I told her it wasn't her job to fix things. She nodded, then tucked the letter under her pillow. The next few days were quiet. I focused on resting. Isla colored at the kitchen table and kept the volume down without me asking. One morning I walked into the living room and found her writing something with her school pen, the one with the little star topper. She folded a paper and slid it into an envelope with the letter from my doctor. "Are you mailing that?" I asked. She looked up. "They need to understand." I didn't stop her. The conflict wasn't just the cancer. It was the silence. The choice my parents made to turn away. And the impossible strength my daughter found in the middle of it all. That was when I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep pretending their distance didn't hurt. I couldn't keep carrying this story alone. I didn't know that Isla had actually mailed the letter until it was too late to stop her. It happened the following week. I had just come home from a particularly rough treatment session. One that left my bones aching like they were trying to escape my body. I walked into the kitchen, still wearing my clinic scrubs, and saw her carefully licking the corner of an envelope shut. "What's that?" I asked. "The letter," she said, "and my note." I sat down slowly, knees weak. "What note?" She reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of lined paper. Written in her uneven handwriting were the words, "Dear Grandma and Grandpa, Mom is very sick. She told you. You didn't help. Here's her doctor's letter." maybe you'll believe it this time. From Isla. I should have stopped her. I should have told her that it wasn't her responsibility to carry my hurt, but I didn't. I didn't have the energy to explain why what she was doing was both too much and also the bravest thing I'd seen anyone do in my life. Did you already mail it? I asked. She nodded. Yesterday. I walked it to the blue box by the market after school. I looked at her, just looked. It was sitting at the table with crayon stains on her sleeves and her knees swinging above the floor. My child had done what I hadn't been able to. She had refused to be ignored. That night, I lay awake thinking about my parents, about all the ways they had chosen distance over presence, about the years of feeling tolerated instead of cherished. I thought about how quickly they picked up the phone when it came to weddings and holidays, but how silent they were when their daughter's body was breaking down in a hospital chair. I thought about the email, about the request for money, about how my mom had written "love you" at the end. Like that made it normal to ask for help funding a honeymoon while I was losing my hair in clumps on the bathroom floor. And I thought about Isla, how she watched everything, how she was learning what love looked like, not just from me, but from how others treated me. Something hardened in me that night, not in a bitter way, but in a way that said, enough. Enough waiting, enough silence, enough hoping they would become different people. I couldn't change them, but I could change what I allowed into my life. The next morning, I called out sick from the clinic. I didn't tell them why. I needed the space. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote out a list of bills: rent, utilities, prescriptions, CO-pays. I totaled them. Then I opened my email, went back to my mom's message and typed a reply. Hi Mom, thanks for checking in. I'm unable to help with Marielle's honeymoon expenses. I've been using every dollar I have to cover treatment. You haven't called once since I told you I had cancer. That hurts more than I can explain. Isla has noticed. She mailed you something. I didn't stop her. If you read it and you understand what you've ignored, I hope you'll reach out. But don't ask me for money again. Sarah. I didn't sign off with "love you." I hit send and closed the laptop. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness, from adrenaline. For the first time in months I felt like I had taken something back. Not control exactly, but clarity. That day, I didn't wait by the phone. I didn't check my email. I didn't pace around hoping for a response. I took Isla to the park. I watched her hang from the monkey bars and laugh when she dropped into the mulch. She didn't mention the letter again. Neither did I. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a shouting match or a phone slam down. It was a choice. A quiet, powerful one. I stopped begging people to care. It's strange how something shifts when you stop reaching for what has always been out of reach. You start to see what you do have. You start to honor who stayed. For me, that was Isla. That was enough. I didn't know what my parents would do with the letter. I didn't know if they'd even open it, but I knew this. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to be silent anymore. 2 weeks after Isla mailed the letter, my Aunt Lena invited us to a family brunch. She called on a Saturday morning and said, "It would mean a lot if you came. Everyone will be there." Everyone met my parents. At first I was going to say no. I had nothing to prove, no desire to sit across a table from people who had looked the other way when I needed them. But something in her voice made me pause. Not guilt, just a quiet honesty. She wasn't asking for them. She was asking for Isla, for me, for a family that still had gaps to close. So I said yes, not for them, for myself. The morning of the brunch, I put on a clean blue blouse, the one that still fit right since chemo. Isla wore a yellow dress with little sunflowers along the hem. She packed her favorite book in her backpack and told me, in case I get bored from grown-up talking. We pulled up to Aunt Lena's house, a modest ranch-style home on the edge of a cul-de-sac lined with tulips and trimmed hedges. Inside, the dining room was already full. My Uncle Bob was slicing bagels. Mariel stood near the window, laughing softly as she scrolled on her phone. I scanned the room and saw them, my mother and father, standing near the kitchen island. My mom was dressed in pastel pink, my dad in a blazer like it was a job interview. When they saw me, they didn't smile, they didn't wave, they froze. Isla didn't hesitate. She walked straight toward them, her backpack bouncing with each step. She reached in, pulled out the now creased envelope and held it out to my father. "Did you read it?" she asked. The room went silent. He took the envelope, looked down at her, and nodded. His face lost color. He opened the flap slowly, like he already knew what was inside. He pulled out the letter from my oncologist, the one with my name, diagnosis, treatment history, and prognosis typed in clinical language. Then he unfolded Isla's note. He read her words, hands trembling. My mother took it next. She read it without speaking. Her eyes moved slowly across the page. Halfway through, she sat down at the nearest chair. Not dramatically, just as if her knees had decided they couldn't hold her up anymore. No one said a word for a long time. When my mother finally looked up, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You went through all of this alone?" I nodded. She blinked like she didn't quite believe it. "Why didn't you tell us again?" Isla stepped forward. She did. My dad opened his mouth and closed it again. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. Aunt Lena cleared her throat, trying to ease the tension. "Why don't we all sit down? Food's getting cold." We took our seats. My mom stayed quiet. She kept her hands folded on the table, the letter between them like a weight she didn't know how to carry. My father didn't eat. He kept glancing at me, then back at his plate. Eventually he spoke. I didn't know how to respond. I told myself you were exaggerating, that maybe it wasn't as bad as it sounded, but it was easier to believe that than to admit I failed as a father. I said nothing. I didn't need to. For once the silence was theirs to hold. My mom looked at Isla. "You are so brave." Isla shrugged. "She's my mom." That was it. That single sentence carried everything. It stripped away the excuses, the distance, the years of emotional absence. It said what I couldn't, what I no longer had to. After brunch we left without saying much more. No dramatic goodbyes, no promises of change, just a quiet parting in the driveway. As we buckled into the car, Isla looked over at me and asked, "Are you okay?" I looked in the rearview mirror, took a breath and said, "I think I will be." What changed that day wasn't my parents, it was me. I saw their shock, I saw their guilt. But more than that, I saw my daughter standing there, fierce and calm, unshaken in her love. The truth had been read, out loud, in front of everyone. For the first time, it wasn't dismissed. It was received with trembling hands and lowered eyes. That was the moment everything changed, not because they apologized, but because I stopped waiting for it. In the days that followed the brunch, I didn't hear from my parents. No apology, no long message, no phone call. At first I thought I'd feel gutted by the silence, but I didn't. I had already lived through the worst of it. The hardest part wasn't hearing nothing. It was realizing I had expected anything in the first place. I'd been holding space for their love like an empty chair at a table, hoping they'd arrive. But now, the chair was gone, and I didn't miss it. 2 weeks later, an email came from my mother. No subject line, just 5 lines of text. We read the letter again. "We didn't know the depth of what you were going through. We're ashamed. We hope one day we can talk when you're ready." I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I was tired. Not just from the cancer, but from carrying the emotional labor of a relationship that had always asked me to reach farther than they were ever willing to meet me. That fall I went into partial remission. My doctor said the signs were promising. My body slowly was fighting back, my hair began to grow in patches, my appetite returned. I could walk up the stairs without needing to rest. And every time I felt stronger, I saw Isla watching me with pride in her eyes, like she had known I'd get here all along. She started leaving notes for me in the most unexpected places. One tucked into the mirror, "You are strong." One inside the cereal box, "You are my favorite person." One in my clinic bag, "Even on bad days you shine." She had become my mirror. Every bit of love I had poured into her, she poured right back. I returned to work part-time. The clinic welcomed me like I had never left. My coworkers gave me space when I needed it, and laughter when I didn't know I needed that too. Patients hugged me when they heard what I had survived. One of them, a young mom, asked how I kept going. I told her the truth. I stopped waiting to be loved the way I deserved. I started loving myself like I'd always wished they would. One Saturday afternoon, Isla and I were sitting on a park bench with ice cream cones dripping down our wrists. She asked, "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will try again?" I took a breath before I answered. "Maybe." "Will we see them?" "Maybe," I said, "if they show up differently." She nodded like that made perfect sense. Then she looked up at me and said, "I think you're really brave." I smiled. "I think you're the bravest person I know." And she was. She had stood in the middle of a family storm and held steady. She had spoken truth without flinching. She had reminded me in the quietest and most profound way that we are never powerless when we speak with love. What I learned through all of this wasn't just about illness. It wasn't just about parents who couldn't show up. It was about who did. It was about the quiet strength of a child, the stillness of survival, the dignity of choosing yourself over and over again when others do not. I used to think family meant blood. But now, I believe family is built in actions. It's the people who see you without needing to be asked. It's the hand that reaches out before you fall. It's the child who carries your truth when your voice is too tired to lift it. If you've ever been abandoned, overlooked, forgotten by the people who were supposed to love you, please know this. Their failure is not your reflection. You are not too much. You are not too quiet or too complicated or too demanding. You are not invisible. You are worth the phone call. You are worth being sat beside. You are worth being believed the first time. And if you never get that apology, I hope you find something better. Yourself, whole and unshakable, standing in the aftermath with your head high and your heart intact. That's what I found, and I'm still here. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt alone during something you shouldn't have had to face by yourself, I hope you know now. You're not alone. There are people out there who will stand with you, even if they're not the ones you expected. And sometimes it takes one brave person, like a child handing over a letter, to remind the world what love is supposed to look like. If this video meant something to you, please like it. Share it with someone who might need to hear it and leave a comment below. I read every single one, and your words truly matter. And if you want more real stories about healing, family, and the moments that change everything, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss one. Thanks for being here. Take care of your heart. You deserve that.